Computer.
Yeah.
All right, welcome everybody back to Aligning with Success. We're in week 24. I was just counting. We're like two more sessions and we'll be mid-year, which in that case, we're going to have to take stock of how we're doing with respect to the progression towards our goals. Because if you're not serious about it, well, then why should anybody be, right? So we definitely need to measure. What you measure matters. If you don't measure it, you're just signaling to the universe it doesn't matter, and that's true about everything. So week 24, um, Dave, I didn't come packed with an agenda tonight. I just thought one of the things that we could brainstorm on is the number one issue that I think affects our business, and that's exposure. I think it was your terms in one of our text messages back and forth is that we needed more exposure. And we've had, I think, to date, uh, is it two or is it three? If we include the one call that Sherry was on as a diamond, that would be three ABC calls with a diamond. We're at mid-month, three ABCs of 100, which is the goal. Each of you submitted goals. Where are you at on that? And why aren't you any further than where you're at? That's kind of the big concern because until that changes, nothing we do on this call matters. No presentation I deliver. I could deliver the best PowerPoint presentation since the son of man, but you're not going to care because if you're not putting it in front of people, it doesn't matter.
Well, I think and then also to add on this as far as a review topic or something to think about or so first of all, we need to really define who we are as an individual from the standpoint of what we do in the sense of the bigger picture. So I always considered myself an entrepreneur, and I also considered myself the CEO of my business. And so whatever venture I was involved with, the path that I had to create was the success path. In other words, where are we going? What's the goal? What's the purpose? The reason for the goal? What are what policy are you going to follow or whose policy are you going to follow? What's the plan? What's the program? That admin scale that we talked about in the beginning, because that's really your business plan and it covers everything you would need to be aware of as a CEO. Now, the next thing that I think is also important, we talked about this in one of the lessons, was condition. Your condition. Where are you at present time with regards to your business, your position, the results that you're trying to create? And we found out that those conditions started at non-existence. They went up from, then into danger, emergency, normal, affluence, and power. And they were all based on the shape or the direction of your production. So in 1991, my first year in business, I did $119,000 in income. And then I left the business. I left the business for 3 years and went back into corporate America and got involved with the wireless industry, which and did a couple of projects that eventually got sold to Sprint. And in the next 3 years, my income hovered around 100,000, maybe down to 80,000. So kind of went straight across. And then when I came back in 1994, then I applied the condition, which was emergency. And the first thing of emergency is produce. So then I produced and went up from there to an affluence all the way up into a power trend in the next 4 years. So I think what's really important to be aware of today, 2025, is where are people at in their emotional state with life and living and what's going on in society, and what aspect of that can you solve or use as a potential problem solution utilizing what you do here with Nikken? And I think one of the
Let's
real
actually explore that, Dave, because that's such a big topic and it's so relevant.
Yeah, yes. Well, I was just going to say, if we look at it, instability is probably the worst thing that anybody can deal with. In other words, it's up, it's down, it's sideways. Which way is it going to door? Is the door going to open? Is the door going to close? Do I have a job tomorrow? Do I have a job later on in the, where that instability in life puts pressure on the individual and stresses them out, and they're less productive when they're stressed out. And they're more productive when they're not stressed out. So the answer is to present a solution that people can gravitate to and understand, comprehend, and do. And this comes back to some of the people that I'm working with today. One of the biggest things that I'm trying to teach is you have to have your deal, your story, your objective dialed in like no tomorrow. You got to know where you're going, why you're going, what you're doing 100%, 1,000%, 1,000,000%, so that when you run into somebody else that you're communicating with that has an issue or a problem, the best way to get them to join you is to understand what you're doing. When they
And
see what you're
and
doing
and
as a
and I want to
solution.
just underscore this point. If you're not dialed in 1,000%, doesn't matter what you say.
Exactly.
They're going to pick up on your energy and know you're half in, and they're not going to be
Exactly.
at all interested in knowing what half of you is in.
So I'm going to go back a bit again because it's relative just to the mechanics of what we were doing. So I needed to make $8,000 a month. So what I had to understand, what did I have to do for Nikken in Nikken as a result of being exposed to Nikken so that Nikken would give me that check for $8,000? That was the first question I had to ask myself. And then once I understood that, and it took me 2 or 3 months to get that totally dialed in, then I had a blueprint. And the blueprint showed me what $8,000 meant in terms of in terms of Nikken, what you'd have to do, the size of your organization, the number of golds, silvers, platinums you'd have to have in your business, the volume you have to have, all of those fine points. Because the reality is this: if you want to make $1 or $2 or $100 or $10,000 or $100,000, something has to occur, and it has to be based on what Nikken says they'll pay you that amount of money. It's pretty simple. It's like when you go for a job and you're being hired by an employee or employer, and you got a salaried position, and you say, "Well, what's the salary?" Well, they said the salary is $40,000 a year. That's what it is. So you know what you're going to get paid, but what do you have to do to earn that 40,000 becomes the next question. And then you get trained and you go about the business. And I guess my cognition early on in life was, well, sales, there was no limits. Being salaried, you were limited. Being a salesperson, the sky's the limit. You can go to the moon with your ability. It's just how hard or how fast or how much were you willing to do in order to create that kind of an exchange. Well, we're in the same business. There's no question of it. There's absolutely no question. So our job is to paint a picture, tell a story, and get others to see what they could do by doing what you do. And that's what has always been the success. And by doing that over the last 35 years, what the company has shown us is that when we do that en masse, we grow like a weed. But if we don't do it, we don't grow. Isn't that a fascinating relationship? But that's the truth of the matter. So
Pause on that note.
today,
Pause on that note, because
yes,
it does take a critical mass. So I want to
yes.
talk about critical mass. Go on.
Anyway, so the stage is set. We're in a perfect storm right now because there's so much instability in society. People are looking for an answer. And the answer isn't just join me in Nikken. That's not the answer. That's the preamble to the bigger picture of let me show you what this business can do. let me put it in and you would have it all in writing. You would have the pictures, you would have the success stories, you would have the testimonials. Now, here's something you really want to pay attention to. I wasn't making big money when I started. I used somebody else's story. So there's plenty of other people's stories right now that you could utilize to show somebody how this works. But you can make it even simpler. You can do the simple math and mechanics of what the compensation plans they'll pay somebody. And that works real easy. And as I've said to others that are doing this business, of the seven people, and actually six that I got to get to the level of platinum that get me to Royal Diamond, each of them on their own made the decision that this is what they were going to do based on the information I provided them. And they went to work. I really want you to understand how powerful that is and what that truly means. Because it's if you look at it, your job is to do what you do, but for your organization and group, it's they do what they do based on what you show them and help them with. So I'll shut up now, Michael, and you can play with those points and maybe we can get some interaction with the group and
Okay.
move forward.
So here's what I got essentially. Number one, instability, big issue. Present a solution. Present Nikken in a way that it solves one of the biggest challenges most people have as a feeling of instability, insecurity. Two, you're not going to be effective at presenting any solution if you're not 100%, 1,000% dialed into how Nikken solves that problem for you. Three, critical mass is something that can be attained and must be attained in order for the business to have growth and momentum. And in order to attract people into the business, you have to have a process which begins with your story dialed in that solves the problem of instability for you that they might relate to. Sell the process to duplicate to reach critical mass. So that's kind of how I am piecing this together here today. So let's start with the most obvious thing. How does Nikken present an opportunity to create stability in a situation that might be unstable for someone? And more specifically, how does that relate to you? The idea here is you got to be dialed into a story. Like, when somebody means what they say and says what they mean. It's very clear. They're very transparent. They wear their emotions on their sleeve. They're very intent and intense when they speak. So, 1,000% dialed in. How do you know if you're 1,000% dialed in or not? Probably by your results of who you're attracting. And I do want to get to that as well, by the way, kind of ways to attract more people, more, what do we call that? Exposure. Exposure. That's a huge one because that as the front end of the funnel, and that's what determines. If you guys had 20 people knocking on your door to get into Nikken, you wouldn't need to be on this call. You'd be so busy trying to figure out what to do with these people that you wouldn't have time for this call. Problem is, you all have too much time. And I'm making a loose argument there, but I think it's true. I think if you had more people to talk with about Nikken, tell your story, then there would be less challenge. You would just simply have people joining as customers, consultants. Some will follow you into the business and do more. And if we had critical mass, which is one of the other points that you're speaking about, Dave, is that if we were all on the same page, if we were all, because that's what happened. Dave and I caught a wave, and it was because we created the collection of people created critical mass, and that critical mass is like a chain reaction. You can't stop it. It just becomes a fire, a raging fire that just takes sweeps everything up in its path. So critical mass needs to be an effort that comes. One of the reasons why I even set a goal for 100 ABCs is because that's the only way we're going to create critical mass on this group. And if we're not creating critical mass this group, then this group has been educated to death on what to do. And it's if you're not doing it, what's the point of educating you? That's not the problem. The problem is that you don't know. The problem is not that you don't know what to do, even if you say that. Even if you told me on this call, you said, Mike, I don't know what to do. I'd say BS. You spent you've spent the last how many weeks with us, and how
Yeah.
many times have we gone over the same thing? You don't know what to do. That's not the problem. So the problem is you're not doing what you're being shown to do is the bigger problem. And that's a question of motivation. So where's that coming from? Well, maybe you haven't simply identified why Nikken has to be on the front burners in your life. And if it's not important to you, then it's not going to be important to somebody else. Certainly not to somebody who's going to really take this thing on. Yes, we can all sell products. We don't have to do much to do that. I think it's Nikken's products sort of are self-explicit and explanatory, and people like them and they buy them. And I don't think you have to show tremendous intensity to sell a product. But to gather people, to create a movement, that's a different thing. And I mean, that's really what we need to do as a collection here is create a movement. So getting back to dialed in, are you 100%, 1,000% dialed in on how Nikken solves a problem for you that nothing else will? Or that nothing else matters. You want this to be the thing that does it because you've seen that it can and you like what it is. There's other ways to make money, that's for sure. Is it going to be as meaningful, as purposeful, as identifiable with you and so forth? Maybe, maybe not. But you found this. What's the point of shopping for another experience when you got one that can take you where you want to go? So now get in the car and start driving. Like put the pedal to the metal and let's get busy. So that means getting dialed in. So the next point was critical mass. If we don't hit our 100 ABC calls, am I going to be disappointed? No. Is Dave going to be disappointed? No. It's just going to be a fact, a
I might
number.
cry though.
He does that when we're in private. But it'll give us a temperature reading of where we're at in terms of our own being dialed in. Um, so yeah, we definitely need to hit critical mass if this is going to become easier for all of us. It'll be so much easier for all of us if you get on a Nikken call and there's a whole bunch of people there you've not seen before. I know that you get on any Nikken prospecting calls and you notice the one or two names that are different that you've not seen before. And you know there's a guest on the call. That should be every week, all the time. It should never be a surprise. It should be, I don't know anybody on this call, just a handful of people. That's the right call. And so to create that, we got to be equally committed to doing that. Critical mass. The tell a story, the process. It's not just telling the story, it's duplication. It's the idea that we have to duplicate what we're doing. So what we're doing has to be simple enough that somebody can follow it and do it themselves. So what is your process? We've gone over different ways of communicating why, how, what, why, how, what, why, how, what, or excuse me, why, how, what. That's the three steps. So the why, how, what is the process, how you're communicating that process to people. But again, it all comes back to exposure. And exposure is a function of, by the way, is it convenient or inconvenient to expose people in Nikken? Which is it? That's not rhetorical. You can answer.
It could be either, and it could be both.
Okay. What is it most likely?
Inconvenient.
Yeah. So do people want to be inconvenienced?
No.
No.
Don't do
So
it.
if your method is inconvenient and that's what they pick up on, this is very inconvenient. They don't want to be inconvenienced, so they're not going to follow through on
You
that.
have to change your method.
So your method has to be convenient. Your method has to be something that's so convenient that they can see themselves doing because it's so convenient. So think about that. What could turn your initial conversation, you're telling a story, you're 100%, 1,000% dialed in, into something really convenient that speaks to what it is that people are looking to solve, the lack of security, the instability in their life. What do you want to track them to? Stability. What do they need to see? Stability. Stability and a convenient way to achieve it. You give them that, and they'll be paying attention. Barbara.
Your persona has to project some of that attitude
Yes, it
because they're
does.
going to connect with the what you are portraying, whether they want to know more or not. If you're excited and enthusiastic about something without giving verbal diarrhea, you want to create the curiosity that they're going to lean in and tell me more.
Yes. I find questions the simplest way to get somebody to lean in. If they're questions that attract people,
Yeah, but
um,
ask the questions and really listen to what they're saying. Listen
yeah,
to understand because you can't understand what they're looking for unless you really listen to what they're saying.
yeah, okay. Let's get to
Then you
part
can
two after we talk
respond
about part one.
appropriately.
What's part
Yeah,
one though? It's what is it that's going to solve the problem? It's going to be you
attaching of
being
people.
dialed in 1,000%, solving the problem of instability for people. And their instability comes in many ways. It's financial, it's physical. Those are the top two. You don't even have to go beyond that. And you don't have to solve everybody's problem all the time. One of the problems I think in Nikken is we're trying to be something for everybody, and we're not. That's a waste of time. Be very good at something. Don't be a master of all. What do they say? Jack of all trades, master of none. You're a jack of all five pillars, but a master of none. Pick something. Make that your strength. Make that your focus, and amass an army of people who relate to it. For me, it's always been finances. It's never been anything else. It's finances. And that stems from mind. That comes from the attitude, mental attitude. So if somebody has the right attitude to get out of whatever the situation is they're in, like Dave keeps talking about this, he repeats that point. The point was he had to solve a problem. And then he figured out how to solve the problem because he had to solve a problem and he figured out how he wanted to do that. So no one told him to do that. No one said you have to solve this problem. It was he made that decision that he was going to solve the problem, however, he was going to solve the problem. And he figured it out with what was given to him. And back then, there wasn't a lot. There wasn't a lot of information. There wasn't a lot of support. There certainly wasn't anything like this, a training call. So it's got to be communicated in a way that is attractive. That is when you're 1,000% dialed in. I don't care who you are. When you're 1,000% dialed in on something, people lean in. They want to know what you're talking about. Why are you so passionate about what you're talking about? The only reason why they do that is because they're not that passionate about what they're doing.
Michael, I'd love to share a picture.
Yeah, and then we'll get to you, Michelle. Go ahead, Dave. Can you?
Okay.
Yeah, good.
Can you see that?
Give it a second. There we go.
Okay, so this is what I was taught in the very beginning. If I wanted to have a silver, then a silver had to, the benefit of silver was getting paid to the second level. What would cause the second level to produce? Having somebody on the third and the fourth. So the idea was that if I wanted this to occur, I had to build this below. And what happened when this happened, when I went first, second, third, and fourth, then I developed a team of individuals that were all on the same page. And when the fourth went into action, because the silver first, second, and third helped him, and created a bunch of volume down there, they all benefited from that volume. And what happened, and this was maybe very fortuitous, but every single leg I built was built on this concept. So my job with somebody that came in was first off to help that person build deep. What that created was the old adage that we learned way back in the 70s. The first thing you want to do is put a check in their mailbox. If you can put a check in their mailbox, then they believe. And so it's the same concept. If you can sell, they get them to sell a product, get them to sign a distributor, whatever the case may be. But here was the phenomenon that was so incredible about this was when the silver saw the first level below him, he got excited. When he saw the second level below him, he was starting to jump out of his seat. When he saw the third and the fourth, he was telling the world how well this worked. See, and again, it's a concept, it's an idea, but it builds the belief system because how do you get paid? You get paid when somebody else does something. And that's the same for everybody else. And that's the magic of network marketing. So if you can help that silver producer, the first level, the second level, the third, and the fourth, then once that starts to occur, you have, and that was the basis of the book, vested interest. And so do a bunch of other people have vested interest. And what I found was that, man, if I can take a person and drive that down 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 levels below them, I'm locking in my future. And that's basically all that happened. So I'll stop the share and then we can carry on.
Michelle, you were up next. We'll get back to that concept of tap rooting.
Thank you. This is very interesting conversation. What I am hearing is the first thing out of the 5 pillars is the mind. You have to first have the mindset. Without that mindset, you can want all the money in the world, but you have to have that mindset, the belief and the trust and the faith. You talk about that all the time. And I think the mindset is maybe where we're lacking right now is the faith and the belief, whether it's in ourselves, in the company, somewhere there's something missing. And it all starts with the mind. When you have your mind set on something, there's nothing going to stop you. Not the finances, not the body, nothing. First,
So true, Michelle. So true.
You know, I was speaking with Luis on his return from Colombia. He had a trip to Colombia and Mexico, and he was interviewing the next generation leaders there. Not the leaders, the next, what he was seeing, interviewing them to see what potential they had to be the next superstars in that part of the world. And he mentioned there was a gentleman that he was interviewing, and he asked him what his goal was and his financial goal. And he said $1,500 a month. So Luis, and I'm giving this to you in short, he suggested a book that this gentleman read. And he said, I'm going to give you my number. I want you to contact me in a month after you've read it. And let's have this conversation again. And the book that he recommended he purchase and read is Think and Grow Rich. So here you go. It wasn't a network marketing book. It wasn't, it was a book that essentially addresses the number one issue that people have or lack when it comes to success in any fashion, in any form. It's the lack of the correct mindset. And so Think and Grow Rich places it squarely in the mind, the area of the mind. Yes. And when you have a problem to solve, that's where you have to start. And this group has a problem because it's not been solved. We do not have the growth from this group we should have. 6 months, almost 6 months into this run, for this year. So what's the problem? Is it Nikken? Do we really need to point fingers? Is it the products? Do they stop working? Does the Nikken compensation plan not pay whatever percentage they say they pay on the volume that we generate? So
It's us. It's us.
it's mind. It's the area of the mind. It always is. That's the first place to start with every shift, every change, everything that's got to happen, which is what Dave was talking about. If you're not 1,000% dialed in, it really doesn't matter what the solutions are. It doesn't matter what our strategies are. It doesn't matter how many times we gather and meet on a weekly basis. It doesn't change because the attitude, the mind has not changed. You're not perceiving a different outcome. You're not perceiving it in your mind. You're waiting for it to be showing up to show up on the outside somehow. Oh, if somebody else or if something else, you're looking for the answer on the outside. It doesn't go from outside in, it goes from inside out. That's how it always goes. It goes from the higher to the lower, from top to bottom, higher to lower vibration, higher frequency to lower frequency. Thought is a higher frequency than manifestation. From the thought into manifestation goes from inside out. It starts from within. And you need to align yourself with that. That's why we call this call aligning with success, because success is a frequency. Success is a vibration. Success is an attitude. It's a
It's a lot of
mindset,
fun too.
and it's totally fun. Man, it's the only way to live.
Yeah.
And to be that person that walks into a room and everybody goes, "Who's this person?" They don't even know you, but they feel you. They feel something about you. It shows up in the twinkle in your eyes and the way you stand with confidence and calm and assurance. Now you could be in the middle of an absolute storm at home, financially, whatever. That is only a reflection of the person you have been until that point in time. It's just simply the manifestation. We create and the manifestation shows up later. It rarely shows up at the same time. So whatever's going on is a result of some thinking in the past. As people would say, some stinking thinking in the past. So if we're going to go into a productive and prosperous cycle, it has to begin first in your mind, regardless of circumstance, regardless of condition, regardless of what you're seeing happening, because it's a reflection of something that has been meditated on for some time, whether you're conscious of it or not.
I have a story, Michael.
Wait, let's get to Madeline, and then we'll get to the story. Madeline.
Okay.
I was just going to pick up on comments that Dave made earlier. You leverage others. And so, like the young man that I almost got to you, this is a guy that's on fired with Think and Grow Rich. And he's doing what you did, Dave, a sales job, a very aggressive sales job, but he's working like 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. So that's what he's focused on. He's 25 years old. He's reading the book. He's exercising. He's getting his mind, his body in, but he isn't ready to take the time out to do that. Now, to find that mindset, I go to the next level, those that I've attracted and didn't quite get to the ABC. They are raising kids, going to soccer games, working the 2 jobs already, and just bringing up that mindset. Now, they're all saying, I appreciate your energy. I'm attracted to your belief, but the ones so far, they're either in that busy work. And then when I say, so then I've offered looking at some of these videos, which they have, and the response text back is same old people. Look at that. Not many. Where is the young people? You've mentioned that we need success. We need a few of those pebbles in the pond to show the success. We don't have anybody we have a couple silvers, a couple seniors or executives, but there isn't the depth anywhere. There isn't a new platinum or a new gold that is really on fire. I mean, Leo keeps bringing people, but we're looking for somebody that's also going to advance in rank to use that example of now. And
Okay, so Madeline,
I know we have
that
to
speaks
begin
to
it. We
Dave.
need to begin it. We need to begin
That
it.
speaks to Dave's point of the taproot.
Yes,
Okay,
I agree.
because
I agree.
getting somebody here is one thing, getting them launched is another thing.
And getting
So
them to get somebody else
hey,
in
I've got
front of
my own challenges there. Getting them to the party is one thing. Getting them to commit to a launch is a second thing. Okay. So the taproot concept that Dave's talking about is where you drive it straight down instead of horizontal. You drive it down in that leg, which creates vested interest. So there's always been the argument of, do we taproot? That's what that's called when you go one under the other. That taproot, that's one concept, and width is the other concept. Sponsor enough people that somebody's going to do something. That I don't think that one flies. I think Taproot is critical in
Very
this era. If we
It
had
lights the
momentum,
fire from beneath.
if we had momentum, then width would be more doable because everybody would come on to calls and they would see things are happening and they wouldn't need as much motivation and support. The taproot is the starting point of creating the momentum. It's finding someone to partner with and then immediately going to town to find somebody that they can partner with and continuing that journey down. Now, if they're not yet a silver, all that volume accumulates into OV. So you're giving them the volume that they're going to need to go silver, right? So, and so this idea of a taproot is a very important phenomenon when it comes to duplication, because if you're not duplicating, it's because you're not taprooting. You didn't get the initiation into that person to build a first level, and then to initiate that person into building a first level, and then to initiate and so forth. That concept is really critical for setting in motion duplication. So keep that in mind. That's top of the list that we've been talking about here tonight. We talked about being 1,000% dialed in. That's about mindset. That's about living in your mind a future reality as though it's already in existence now. But you got to know what it looks like, what it feels like. You got to wear it. And when you walk into a room, people ought to notice it, even though you're not that person necessarily yet in the physical manifestation. They got to feel like that. They got to get the sense from you that that's who you are. You got to wear it well. The success, the vibration of success. Um, that's how you're going to make yourself more attractive. We haven't talked about um, increasing increasing exposure, because that is going to ultimately factor into how quickly you can gather up a handful of these people that you can taproot. Barbara.
With regard to taprooting, Mike, um, some time ago, years back, when we used to put more of a focus on taprooting, before it was, build wide, I remember there being an argument. Yeah, but if you're going to taproot, you have to know the person that's going to sponsor the next person that's going to sponsor the next person. They don't have to be a known person, do they? If you've got somebody interested, if you, as the leader, are working with those people, can you not put them in position so that they all benefit and they work together and they feel the momentum and they feel the excitement?
Yeah, you can, but let me just hit this nail on the head for a second here, because this challenge of what width versus depth, width versus depth. Width is profit, depth is security. Width is profit, depth is security. Okay, just remember that. Our compensation plan, that's how it works. Width is profit, depth is security. But when you're initiating activity with somebody, let's say you just sponsored somebody brand new. Okay. How do you know you're going to find that hot pistol that you can taproot? Well, one way you can do it is to go wide very quickly. Like I'm talking about a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks max. A blast of width, which we used to call the 21 Club, which we now call the 21 Club. It was a blast of activity that caused a number of things to happen. Retail sales, people get interested, people join. Then you sift through that to see who is potentially the person you're going to launch next. There's the beginning of the taproot. And then that person gets taprooted. How? Blast of energy. So they go wide real quick. 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks of an activity causes retail sales, causes people to get excited, causes some people to join. And from that group, you sift through to find out who the next person is that you're going to work with to launch. And then you launch that person. And you're building the taproot by finding the right person to taproot by going wide in a short, very short period of time. It's not a protracted thing. It's not the next 6 months we're going to sponsor 10 people. It's the next 6 days or 6 weeks. We're going to put your front line, and then from that, we're going to identify who we're going to work with next. And your job as the sponsor is to single out that taproot, that potential person, help them launch. So it's a combination of things. It's a focus on two very specific things. It's launch, which is a movement across, and then taproot, which is a movement down, which then leads to another launch. That's duplication. Now, if you had 100 people that you had on a list right now, and your job was just to launch, go crazy, expose all 100 in the next 2 weeks. You're going to find some people who join as customers, some people who join as consultants, and some people who are potentially the next person to launch. But if you take 100 weeks to go through 100 names, you're not going to find anything because there's no passion, no purpose, no fire, no wave, no movement, no energy, no nothing. Same number of people, protracted over a large period of time, doesn't produce the same results. Sue, and then Dave.
Still waters. Yeah, still waters.
Unmute, there we go. One of the things that I'm doing in regard to exposure, and I've been having really good luck with the Live Empowered motto that I have going. Anyways, I'm trying to tell the same story so that if I see people out and about and I'm talking to them, or if they're online and they happen to see me on LinkedIn or they see me on Facebook or whatever, I'm telling the same story on all of those. So they think of me, whenever they think of me, they think Live Empowered. So I think that's something important as far as exposure goes, for everyone that's selling the Nikken products.
You're
And
branding.
Exactly.
You're creating a brand identity. People are going to identify you with as the lady who lives empowered.
Exactly. But one of the things that when I told you I was at the auto dealer and I carried in my cup of water because I don't have a bottle. And the guy asked me, he said, "Do you want some water?" And I said, "No, I brought my own." He says, "You brought your own?" I said, "Yeah, it's gold water." And he says, "Gold water? What do you have?" And I said, and I went into the spiel about Nikken. And then pretty soon we started talking about everything. And by the time I was out of there, I had 4 of them interested. And I have 2 people that I'm trying to get to the ABCs now to pin them down to a time. But anyhow, I went back there today and I took them each a necklace because they gave me such a good deal, and thanked them and showed them the power.
Did you do the demo?
I did.
Cool.
I did on all 3 of them.
Awesome.
So anyway,
now,
branding is important, I think.
yeah. So that comes to the strategy for exposure, and we may have to save that for next week. So next week's talk will be about exposure. It'll be 100% about how to create massive exposure. Because we got a good story, guys. It's just got to get out there. Nobody knows about us. Dave.
Okay, so the first statement is going to date me, but back in my younger years as an entrepreneur, I hired a PR man. And the PR man's job was to help me get exposure. And he negotiated a deal and got Zsa Zsa Gabor. And I'm sure you've all heard of the name Zsa Zsa Gabor as
Darling,
our,
I love you, but give me the Park Avenue.
yes, she was our spokesperson. And one of her best friends was the famous chef Puck, and he had his restaurant on Santa Mar in Beverly Hills that
Wolfgang
we
Puck.
Wolfgang Puck, yeah. And she'd take us there. We met with him, and we'd sit down with him and have lunch, etc. So that's dating me. Now, I love HGTV as a show, and it teaches some very valuable lessons. How many people here think flipping has hit its heyday and is passe as a way to make money in modern day society? Well,
Flipping
a lot
as
of
in
people
what?
might think that because
Houses.
everybody's flipped
Oh, okay.
houses.
Okay.
And so this show was a doctor. He was a surgeon. He owed $400,000 in medical bills. He had a young wife and they had no family, and they bought a $900,000 home to flip. And they ran into trouble. And so what they did was they hired help. They hired the pro. They hired one of the top house flippers in the world to help them flip their house. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is you guys might want to think about hiring somebody to help you build a business because that way you're going to put some skin in the game that's going to make this damn valuable and that you're willing to go work. And if you're not spending five or $10,000 to build a business, then you don't have a business. I mean, you really got to think about this in terms of where you're trying to get this and what you're trying to do. So this doctor and his wife, they went about their business. They bought this $900,000 home. They had a budget initially of $120,000 to fix up the house. In the end, they spent over $200,000 to fix the house because they hadn't the right estimates. And they ended up making a decent profit of $89,000. It took them 6 months and they paid down some of his debt. But if they hadn't hired help, they would have never got there. And so sometimes when I ran into situations in my life where I was trying to solve a problem, I went to the pros and said, okay, I need to learn what to do here. I need to figure this out. Not because this is what is generally said. I need to know what I need to do for me. And once I knew how to do it for me, then I had my blueprint. Once I had my blueprint, I could create other blueprints. So I think the moral of our story, what Michael's saying, what I'm saying, where we've come from, what we did, and what we accomplished, is we went to work for real. We found people that would help us for real. And if it cost money, we paid that money because we knew that if we invested in ourselves, then we had to, can't just walk away from the investment. You got to follow through and make it go right, et cetera, et cetera. And sometimes in our business of network marketing, nobody has the skin in the game. They don't, they don't do anything. They're not losing anything. A little bit of time. Okay. They get a little bruised. Okay. Bruised ego and they walk away. But if you had 10, 20, or $30,000 on the line, it's a whole different story. Well, look at the entrepreneurs that have built these huge businesses in tech and artificial intelligence and real estate and all that sort of stuff. Most of them say they started with nothing, but a lot of them leveraged to get the money to put it together to make it go right. So hire somebody to help you. Might be a big change in your life, and you might get what you want to get from doing this business.
Yeah. And maybe it's that younger person that will help you get a fresh perspective on what life is like from their point of view and how they would approach Nikken and market Nikken. That's not a bad idea. Sharing the profits, say, take them on as a, there's all kinds of ways you can do this. Definitely worth looking into. I think that's a great idea, Dave, because we often think we're in this to make money, but we don't think like business people, which is, I'm in this for a return on investment. Business people don't want to spend money. They want a return on investment,
And this
ROI.
this is a very important part. When it came to recruiting, I had hired all kinds of people for other businesses that I had, actually hired them to work for me, to get a salary, to do a job. So you learned how to interview that person to find out if they were qualified to do the job. So I took that knowledge and put that to work in recruitment. So what I had my map all drawn out. I knew the positions I needed to fill. I knew that what those positions did and what the requirements were. So then I would interview the person to see if they could fit into that hole. And if they couldn't do, or they wouldn't do, or they hadn't, or they couldn't communicate, or they didn't have the experience, or they didn't like talking to people, or they weren't social, or all that sort of stuff, then I had to ask myself this question: what am I doing here? Because that person's not going to build a business. And what do I want? I want somebody that's going to go to work, really. And then here's the thing, Barbara, you brought this up. The next person below is going to do what they learn from you. And if you teach them exactly what needs to be done and help them do that, then it's like magic. Michael, how deep are some of your royal diamonds in some of your legs? 15 levels below you, 20 levels below
At
you?
least, yeah. Yeah, that's
I mean,
beyond PA.
and again, how did that come about? It came about by people up above doing what the people up above told them to do, taught them how to
Well,
do it.
and we're going to add this to the next conversation,
Yeah.
exposure and rhythm of the business. That's something that needs to be discussed because at the end of the day, what created a platform for duplication was a thing we refer to as rhythm of the business that they still to this day teach and emphasize in Latin America. Where the growth is, I think I spoke about this last week. Where the growth is, it wasn't on this call, it was on another call. Where the growth is happening in Nikken is where there are live meetings. That's where the growth is happening. So if you look at the cities and countries, all of them, you'll find where the real growth is happening is where there is a live meeting. And so if you look at in North America, there's not that many live meetings, but that's where the lion's share of growth, team growth, like duplication happening, because we are social people and we need proof of concept. We need social proof. We need
That's where you feel the energy.
leverage, and you definitely feel the energy. So we've covered a lot of stuff here today. You could take every 5 minute segment of this call and break it down and really look at it. And I suggest you do. Like, don't. It's not just one long call. It's there were several points that were discussed. Maybe watch this call in playback. Make some of your own notes about some of the things that we talked about because they are all like we could do a master class on every one of these things, starting with mindset. I really Nikken for real. That's what this call is going to be called, by the way. So I'm going to title it Nikken for real. Good one, Dave. We got this concept called feel good every day. Feel good every day. That's the easiest thing to ask somebody. You want to feel good every day? On a scale of 1 to 10, how serious are you about that? That's the qualifying question. It's not if you want to feel good every day. It's how serious are you on a scale of 1 to 10? That's the qualifier. They don't say 10, move on. Now you can move on through that person. You could say, well, do you know somebody who wants to feel good every day who would give me a 10 out of 10 on that? I'm telling you, if you did that, here's what would happen. You would find yourself saying less to more people. Write that down. You
Mhm.
would find yourself saying less to more people. And the goal is to say less to more people. That is the most convenient way to do Nikken. And if you're showing somebody a convenient way, a path that's convenient, where you say less to more people to identify who wants to know more and then provide them with that information easily, simple access to the information where you're not doing all the talking. It's great to be knowledgeable. It's great to know something. You're all very knowledgeable and you know too much for your own good. People can't duplicate what you know. So you've got to share it with them in a way that they too can share it tomorrow with somebody else. You can share it. That's why we have the calls, the brand night calls. I don't talk about the product. Want to know about the product? Here's the list of products. Here's the brand night. Knock yourself out. People ask me all the time, how much does the product cost? I don't know. I have to look it up. You don't know how much your product costs? I don't know. I don't know. I have to look it up. My business is people, not product, but I have to look it up. I'll find it for you. Those are real responses. That's actually how I talk. So what is the
Yep.
impression people get from me? I'm not there to sell
When
them.
people say you don't know the price, and I say, we have so many amazing products, I can't possibly remember all the prices, but I'll be happy to get back to you. And nobody objects. And I don't
It's
carry a
just,
price list around with me either.
again, we talk some really like high level stuff here today. Like the idea of solving a problem that everybody has, instability. And you come across as somebody who's secure, stable, has it going on, and you can demonstrate that in a very convenient way. That's a solution that is appealing. That's a solution I might be intrigued to know more about. Products are going to do what the products do. They're going to impress. They always do. We don't have to worry about that. Don't have to overstate them or oversell them. Do a few demos, get their attention. That to me only reinforces the simplicity of Nikken. When I can do a demo and say, how many people you know would want to feel that? That's what we're talking about, feeling good every day. It's
I put my
easier.
phone number in the chat. If you want to chat or ask questions or get some advice or some help, give me a call.
Take him up on it. He's good. All right, everybody. Again, this is chock full of stuff. So it's going to be look for the Nikken for real. That's the title of this call.
Yeah. Week 24, right, Michael?
Week 24. All right. Have a good night, everybody. Thank
Thank
you. Thanks,
you.
Dave.
Thank you.
Have a
Night,
Good
great
night.
night,
one.
Michael. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.